name is Daniel Mercier. Have you ever seen an advertisement that put a bad taste in your mouth? Particularly when the advertisement is about putting bad tastes in your mouth? You might have seen a few in unskippable ads on YouTube under the campaign title, The Real Cost, which were produced by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to combat vaping, particularly in young adults, to dissuade them from experiencing the negative health consequences. I'm going to discuss 5 of the videos they made, though these points are pretty applicable for all their videos, to discuss how they tried to convince their audience, how they tried to persuade them, how effective they were in actually doing so, and what they could do to become more effective. So first off, the people that they were primarily speaking to, as you might have guessed, are people that are vaping, or people that are considering vaping, since that's specifically the behavior that they're addressing. The demographic they specifically tailored these videos for are youth ages 12 to 17, as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration admitted to on their site. Now, each of these videos follows an order called Fear, Then Relief, which is discussed in the book Persuasion, Social Influence, and Compliance Gaining, which is a textbook for the class that this video is produced for. Fear, Then Relief involves showing something to be afraid of, which are the negative health consequences of vaping, and then it shows you the relief to avoid this fear, which is not vaping. So a couple of the videos depict the exact consequences of vaping, such as metal shards in your lungs, or bad chemicals you don't want to eat as the thing that's putting fear into you. But more often they use iconicity, which is also discussed in Persuasion. They use symbolism that represents the negative effects, such as a giant metal monster, or your team losing a game, or having to lug heavy weights around. These all represent the negative consequences caused by vaping. Now, the fact that most of these are released as YouTube advertisements means that they're already fighting an uphill battle to get the audience's attention, because they were unskippable ads that audiences are just waiting to get through in order to watch a video that they wanted to watch. The one exception, though, is When Training for Your Best, which was produced as a tweet by the WWE wrestler Seth Rollins in collaboration with the FDA. Now, this means that people who want to listen to what Seth Rollins has to say are more receptive to the message, since he's an influencer, but it also means they're not reaching as many people as the advertisements on YouTube. Each of these advertisements involves both verbal and non-verbal communication, obviously. They show the iconicity, they show the imagery, and then they talk about the negative effects of these vapes. And so they appeal to both pathos, they try to inspire fear into you to avoid them, and they also appeal to logos. They usually cite a source discussing the negative effects. And when they appeal to ethos, it's much more subtle, but they do include a link to their webpage at the end, which, when you go to it, shows that they were funded by the U.S. government. So how effective were these videos? For me, they were kind of effective. I was paying attention to them, probably because I was making this video. And I was primarily engaging in central processing, which is in Persuasion, is where you're specifically weighing each argument, weighing all the pros and cons, and you're trying to evaluate it based specifically on its actual merits. That happens usually when you're paying close attention. But with these YouTube advertisements, these unskippable ads, more often people are going to be engaging in peripheral processing, which is the opposite, which you're just listening to how it makes them feel, or what's the number of arguments that they're using, or who's saying it. So, how was it effective for your intended target audience? One study published in Addictive Behaviors suggested, yeah, it's more effective than just saying these are the bad effects. But others have contested this, saying in the real world, they've not just prevented the recent uptick in vaping, they have contributed to it, as Michelle Minton writes in Competitive Enterprise Institute. Ethan Rankin writes in Medium that the reason for this is that they lack strong emotional appeals. The iconicity used isn't very scary for their target audience, maybe for young children, but not for teenagers. And it just ends up being distracting, especially since you're already just trying to get to the next video. Additionally, the one form of credibility they use, which is the appeal to authority, that they're the government, teens don't like authority, as Minton mentions. So that actually creates a case of psychological reactance, as discussed in Persuasion, in which they'll feel like their freedom's being taken away. As for how this has affected the reputation of the real costs, it's worsened it. A YouTube channel called BC Productions goes into all the popular reactions to these videos, calling them cringeworthy and lame and not effective at all. So, how can it get better? Well, first off, both Rankin and BC Productions suggest that they use real people's stories for credibility. Instead of just saying, hey, we're the government, do what we tell you to do, they can show people that have been negatively affected by the effects of vaping, and they can discuss their stories. Then they gain their credibility from their personal experience and not just simply from authority. This is more, BC Productions mentions that this is, as well as Rankin, mentioned that this is more likely to persuade young people. Additionally, I would also suggest that they use a bit more positive reinforcement. Reinforcement expectancy theory, also discussed in Persuasion, suggests that especially if you're a woman, it's easier to convince someone to do something by talking about the benefits of doing it, as opposed to the negative consequences. So maybe they could show people whose lives were positively benefited by quitting vaping. Additionally, making them a little shorter and less intrusive would help as well. People will be less distracted. And they should also do it in more contexts that involve more central processing, such as collaborating with more influencers. So overall, they tried to persuade by using fear and appeals to pathos and a little bit of appeal to authority, but the verdict is out on whether or not they were actually effective. A lot of people arguing otherwise. But there are ways that they can become more effective in the future by relying a bit more on peer-to-peer communication involving people telling their stories as their means of credibility for what they're saying is actually true and accurate, as well as trying to put the advertisements in more context in which people are actually going to weigh the pros and cons, actually going to engage in more central processing as opposed to just wanting to skip through the video. If they decide to engage in these actions, then the plans of vaping companies to get a bunch of people addicted to harmful substances will hopefully go up in smoke. Thank you for your time. I'm Seiter.